Welcome everyone to another CoH2 replaycast. This time we're going to have a 2v2 on 3 points, and it's going to be a replay from CoH2.org sent in by Ice, I believe. So his ally is going to be Renegade, both playing as the Wehrmacht in the north spawn, and in the south we've got two British, Orcrist and Omega Man. So 3 points, what about the map? Map is pretty standard in that there's a pretty usual layout of the points all along the middle, but what's really not standard about it is the rivers, and the rivers is what everyone hates about this map, as well as the sort of terrain that's filled with heavy cover, buildings, and all the likes. So we will see if whoever gains control of the checkpoints and the just in general very tight areas of the map will have the upper hand. And in fact, we do see already a double MG opening out of Ice. Looks like also a double MG opening out of Renegade, so they will definitely want to suppress their opposition as much as possible, but we'll see if they can do that correctly, because remember, this map is very prone to flanking maneuvers because of the huge amount of line of sight blockers. As you can see, all these walls block line of sight, so MGs need to be positioned correctly in order to be able to just suppress the enemy without getting flanked. So we do have two infantry sections from both of our Omega people over here, just standing in heavy cover in a very precarious position though, because as you can see, they're in heavy cover, but at this long range, the machine gun will be able to probably suppress them if they just inch out of heavy cover like that. And in these tombstones in the graveyard, there's a lot of places where it looks like soldiers are in heavy cover, but they're actually not, and so they get suppressed anyway. So you need to be very careful as British when you are trying to use your infantry as best as possible. Now, we do have two Vickers machine guns actually coming in from both of the allied players in the same area, so that is very interesting. And we do have one MG42 trying to suppress the reinforcements that are coming in from the base of the British. That was actually a really good maneuver by Ice, and it's going to allow them to just have local superiority because of the fact that they simply have a line of retreat and a line of advance into the base. So they will be able to bring up reinforcements, whereas the British have to retreat, and possibly this machine gun may actually go down. Now, very lucky that it lives, but still, even if it does live, it's still going to be pretty bad. And we actually have a flank of a machine gun coming in. It's not something you see every day, but it's definitely something that's happening right now. Now, these engineer squads are not doing anything useful right here. I would definitely suggest to both Wehrmacht players that they use their engineers to cap these areas on the left side of the map that have been ignored so far. And we do actually see the flanking coming into full effect. Now all these British units are basically surrounded, and there's nothing they can do. Should definitely retreat as quickly as possible for these two British players and try to just gain control of the left side of the map, because right now the right side of the map is forfeit to them. They should definitely try to cut their losses and take the left side. Now, really good taking out the machine gun with the MG42 in the church. And one possibility is also that sending in one engineer squad to capture the machine gun. Though at this point, to be honest, there are so many machine guns on both sides of the map that I don't think anyone wants to re-grab those that are on the ground. So we do see that Omega Man at least built one infantry section, and Orcrist is going for a Royal Engineer Squad. Now the Royal Engineer Squad is going to be very important because the way the game is developing, I would definitely see the British players going for some kind of placement tactic, because of the fact that, of course, to deal with all these buildings, deal with all these borders, in fact, that Ice is going for, and they will soon be revealed to the British players. To deal with all these things, the British will need some mortar emplacements up and running as quickly as possible. Otherwise, they will just be completely outclassed in the tight areas of the right side of the map, and eventually the Germans will be able to spread to the left side. Now, definitely the biggest mistake that both teams are doing right now is ignoring the left. These are a bunch of resources that there's really no reason not to grab, especially with these squads idle back at base. Squads that are idle are always a bad thing, but especially when parts of the map are uncapped, squads that are idle are doubly bad, because you definitely want to capture as many territories as quickly as possible. Otherwise, you will sort of win the engagements as the Germans have been doing, but as you can see, the resources are kind of still even. Well, the munitions are in favor of the Germans because of this point right here. But yeah, essentially, despite the fact that the Germans won all the engagements and did very well, they still haven't been able to reap the results of that, and that is exactly what you don't want to happen. Because yes, you may win all of the engagements, but then if you don't win the strategic resource war, then you will pretty much be even in the later stages of the game, and you don't want that to happen. You want to have an advantage, as is appropriate. If you're winning the engagements, you should have an advantage. Now, pretty good play by the British over here, trying to grab the buildings, but what's going to counter that is the mortars. The 2 mortars from ice are going to be very important to the Germans because they're just very effective against buildings, and especially if the British do manage to get out some emplacements, that will be the main way to counter the emplacements until later on in the game. Now, both British players have gone for tier 2, but only Orchrist has decided to go for a upgrade, so we do have the Bofors being available to him. And right now, the Bofors is not exactly useful because he doesn't have any map control. So that's definitely why I feel like the British should have switched sides and gone for the left. With both players, just sending in 1 or 2 squads to harass the right side and compel the Germans to keep units there. And the reasoning for that is because you just need to go where the enemy isn't strongest if you're losing. Otherwise, you're just going to keep losing harder. And that would be very important also for his ally, Omegaman, who doesn't really have anything. He's got 2 infantry sections, and oh, he's already lost another one of his squads over here, taken out by a mortar. That's really bad. Should definitely not lose squads. Losing squads is the worst thing you can do, and right now, for the British, it is by far the worst thing that could happen to them, because yes, they are behind in resources, but the British are notoriously good in the later stages of the game. So the main sort of priority that should be right now for the British is to conserve their units and try to gain as much map control as possible without losing too much. And now, nice Panzerfaust by Ice, but that was not a very good play overall because of the fact that this this universal carrier is not in any way in danger. So I'm not sure why you would waste 35 munitions to Panzerfaust it if you're not going to be able to kill it. That is just a waste of munitions that you, well, at this point you can afford because you've got 48 munitions per minute because of the fact that you use those Grenadiers to actually cap those points, which was good on you. But at the same time, it still was not a very useful thing. Now, we do have tier 2 from both Wehrmachts actually, and we do have some 2-2s being built. I would also like for Ice to go for a flame half-track with the way the game is developing. There's a lot of buildings in the south side of the map that the British are occupying that not only the mortars are good against, but the flame half-track from the tier 2 would be really good. But it looks like he's going for a second 2-2, as well as the 2-2 will be useful to support his ally. I would also like a pack gun from either German player, because right now the British don't really have any ability to get out light vehicles or tanks, but soon enough they will be able to, and that will definitely be important to counter them. Just even if you're not seeing or think that it's not possible for the enemy to bring out a light vehicle or a tank, that doesn't mean that they won't. You may just miscalculate the enemy resources or the enemy teching, and they may bring out something. So it's always best to be prepared, and especially if right now you're in a position like Ice and Renegade, who are in a pretty commanding lead and just have the resources to spare, a pack gun would be pretty good. Now, Ice does seem to be the one that has the most fuel of the two, for whatever reason. Oh, it's because Renegade already went for Battle Phase 2. We'll see if the German players decide to go for a Tier 3 or a Tier 4 strategy. I would like one player to go Tier 3 and one player to go Tier 4, because Panzerwerfers are going to be very important with the way the British players seem to be going about their business. In fact, we do have doctrine selections from both of them. Both went for Royal Engineers, so the Panzerwerfer and perhaps a Broom Bear would be very important to deal with the emplacement spam that is likely to ensue right now. So there's a bit of a lull. That is definitely too many machine guns from Renegade. Ice has it toned down a little bit. Ice has definitely the better force of the two. He's a little bit more just evenly spread out along the units that he has, and he's also getting out a pack gun, which is of course a good thing. Renegade and Ice should definitely look into getting a Minesweeper on one of their squads, one each of course, and also should definitely look into mining up the areas that they control around the map, especially in spots like this one. Perhaps this one would be better for an anti-infantry minefield on the points with Tellermine over here, Tellermine over here, Tellermine also over here would be really good, and over here. And of course, perhaps an infantry minefield at this fuel point, which is right now the most contested point around. We do have a sniper actually out from Orcrest, and the sniper will be useful, but right now there's two 222s on the field for the German players, and that's definitely going to be good enough to counter the sniper, unless the 222s decide to be kind of pathetic and just stay at long range and try to duel the sniper at long range, which would definitely be a bad idea, because the British sniper, yes, it does do quite a bit of damage against the light vehicles of the Germans. And we do have a wipe, actually, in the south, perhaps. Not really sure. Yeah, I'm actually not sure where that wipe was. And we still have the duel between the 222 and the sniper, but as you can see, if the 222 can get into close range, then it will be able to shred the sniper, despite its ability to hurt the 222. We do have some mines out from Omegaman. That's definitely a good choice, but at the same time, these mines are a little bit too close to the emplacement that he's building, and also the emplacement has been spotted by Ice's Grenadiers, and Ice's Grenadiers will actually throw down a rifle grenade, and along with some mortar fire, they explode the mine and deal a huge amount of damage to the Bofors. The Bofors might actually go up anyway, because there's two British Royal Engineers that are leading it, and the 222 also will go down from the Bofors after being spawned, but the Bofors will go down as well. And Omegaman will actually waste 50 munitions on a standfast, just not really realizing that his Bofors had been destroyed already. And that is pretty good trade for the Germans, because the Bofors is more expensive than the 222, and also, but it looks like a second 222 will go down to a nicely positioned anti-tank gun, 6-pounder from the rear, destroying the second 222. So the trade is evened out a little bit. I would still make it in favor of the Germans, because the Germans have lost 2 scout cars. Scout cars, of course, being a very early game unit, and later on not really being the most important thing. Though Ice actually had the key to making the 222 very important in the late game as well, which is the spotting scope. Getting the scout car upgraded with that would be a really good boon for the Germans, because it would have pretty much the line of sight to go look from here to here. That's pretty much a rough estimate of the line of sight of the 222 with the spotting scope. It is really ridiculous and really powerful. So if you are picking one of the doctrines with the spotting scope, like the German mechanized doctrine, then keeping your early scout car alive is one of the most important jobs that you have. Unfortunately, that was not to be the case for Ice, but at the same time, whatever. It's only a 222, and taking out the Bofors opens up this area for a lot of assaults from the German players. Now, Ice is going for a tier 3, it looks like, and that's really good because of the fact that right now the Allies are really behind in terms of resources, so getting out that early, for example, Panzer IV or Ostwind even, would be a very nice boon, and perhaps even a Stug, because the Stug is really good against emplacements and really cheap, so you can use that to great effect. Now, one Vet2 mortar is actually in very big danger, and the British mortar emplacement will actually take it down. British mortar emplacement is also at Vet2. It's receiving healing from the standfast ability of the Royal Engineers, and that might actually save it, along with a nice flank from these infantry sections, forcing this mortar to retreat. In terms of infantry, we do have that the British don't really have a lot. There are 3 infantry sections on the field, and 2 of those are from Omegaman. Actually, never mind, this infantry section is going to go down, so only 2 infantry sections are alive, and that is not good, even on a map like this, where support weapons and sort of static gameplay rules the day. Infantry is still the backbone of any army, and you need it just for the capping power. At the same time, we do see Omegaman having 2 Royal Engineers, so at least he's not completely devoid of any foot troops. At the same time, Orcrest is just... he just doesn't have anything. He's got an AT gun standing back at base, and that's not good. You want your AT gun to be doing things proactively. Actually, 2 AT guns. One of them is actually moving out to where, I do not know. and 1 MG holding the North BP, and that's saving them from a triple cap, but at the same time it's not really giving them any resources. The Germans have complete resource control, and they've had complete resource control for the entire game. I would like to see Orchrist, since he is so just fixated on not getting any infantry, I would like to see him getting out an infantry section just to build some fuel caches around. We do have the Panzer IV from ICE, and he's going to get the MG42 upgrade on it, and that's definitely going to be good in shredding these infantry sections and role engineers that Omega Man is going for. But the AT gun will be able to repulse the Panzer IV quite easily. So what ICE should be looking to do is perhaps using the spotting scope on it. It's definitely doing that right now, but the spotting scope on the Panzer IV is not exactly the most effective of the spawning methods that you could have, but still, I would still like to see him rebuying a Scott car and upgrading that with a spawning scope. At the same time, the Germans do have a huge amount of resources in general, so they will be able to use a lot of airstrikes because Renegade does have assault support doctrine selected, so he's going to have both the strafing run and the fragmentation bombing. The fragmentation bombing is a very powerful bombing strike, but it's very slow to come down, and against this kind of a cluster of units and emplacements, it's most effective. And if Renegade can use that correctly, then he will be able to easily deal a lot of damage to these British players who are just clustering up all their things, and that will not be good in the long run. I will tell you that right now. Right now, the Germans, though, are starting to dangerously float a lot of resources. We do have a tier 4 out from Renegade, who has gone for some Opal Blitzes from his doctrine, and also going for a Panzerwerfer. Panzerwerfer already getting out the first salvo at the British emplacement, but it was slightly misaimed to the north and not hitting the Royal Engineers. What you want to be doing with the Panzerwerfer and any kind of rocket artillery firing at the placement is you want to hit the repairing and building engineers, because the rocket artillery will do quite a bit of damage to the emplacements themselves, but it will do even more damage to the troops that are trying to repair and man them, because when your troops are repairing, they take extra damage, so you want to be aiming at those as much as possible. And also, aiming at support weapons is never a bad idea. It looks like Omega Man has actually forgotten his AT gun on attack ground, and that's not good because it's revealing its position to the enemy, and that will allow ICE later on to actually flank the AT gun very well. Now we do see that Orchrist has finally gone for a tier 3, and the tier 3 will be also upgraded by Omega Man, so it looks like we will see a Cromwell out of Orchrist. Now the Cromwell is not exactly the best decision right now for the British players. The Cromwell is a cruiser tank. It's made for speed, it's made for flanking, and just running around the enemy, flanking him, and using its sort of mediocre but also very effective against infantry gun to just wreak havoc on the enemy with the addition of the speed of the tank. But in a certain sort of a frontal slugging match, the Panzer IV will be just superior to it in every kind of way. And especially if Renegade later goes for a Tiger from his assault support doctrine, that would be very, very much just sort of over what the Cromwell can take in terms of frontal engagements, which are also common on this map, because remember, this is Frapont. There aren't very many vehicle flanking paths. While there are a lot of infantry flanking paths, the vehicle pathfinding in cities in this game is not exactly the most accurate or good. So just in a sort of realistic way, of course, because tanks are very hard to maneuver in a city. And so the Cromwell, being a very nice maneuver vehicle, is not exactly in its element in this map. We do see, in fact, the pack from ICE already starting to take shots at long range. And this is not something that the Cromwell can take in any kind of way. The Cromwell, in fact, should retreat right now. Orchrist is pretty much wasting his Cromwell, just taking hits from the pack for just killing a machine gun. And in fact, the Panzer IV will actually be able to chase down the Cromwell and destroy it thanks to the pack's support. So that is exactly why you do not want a Cromwell in Frapont. Especially if you're a player like Orchrist, who seems to like having his units stand still and losing them, he should definitely have gone for a Churchill. Or perhaps even a Churchill AVRE, or perhaps both. Because that would have been much more to his style of play, much more to the style of play that is effective on this map. Because the Churchill would have been able to take a lot more hits from this pack, and it would have been able to just have a lot more time for Orchrist to realize that it was in danger, and we're pulling it back. I feel like a Churchill would have been a better choice. Let's see what Omega Man, though, decides to go for with his tier 3. He hasn't gone for any of the tactics yet, but I feel like either would be kind of a waste at this point. I would like to see a Sherman Firefly out of him, because right now the Germans have a Panther. They are going for heavy armor, and Renegade is even going for 2 Panzer Grenadier squads to round out some of his infantry force, which is very thin at this moment, and more infantry will just be very good for him, even if it's Panzer Grenadiers, which sometimes are sometimes have a bit of a bad rep with German players for being kind of weak in terms of their cost to effectiveness ratio. This Panther should definitely be treated as quickly as possible. Nice Panzer for barrage, but unfortunately it was misaimed, and it should have been aimed more to this way. But we do have an artillery piece actually from Ice, dealing 7 casualties on the enemy. That was a really good play by Ice. Also using his Panzer IV where the AT gun cannot hit it at long range. That was definitely a good play, and the Panther is actually coming back in. That's not a good idea. You never come back into engagement with a tank that's very low on HP, and Renegade knows why now. He has learned the lesson the hard way, and that was a very steep price to pay to kill a mortar emplacement. A Panther was definitely not a good trade for that. But at the same time, the Germans have such a huge resource lead that they can kind of afford to do these kinds of mistakes. Of course, also good play in the north with the Flame Brand Carrier, but the Flame Brand Carrier should have been out in the field from the start of the game, not at 22 minutes. Of course, this vehicle is very good against the buildings, as the Germans are using a lot of buildings. Then the Flame Carrier is a good choice, as would have been a Flame Half-Track from the Germans, but at this point in the game, it's just not good enough, because again, there's a Panzer IV in the field. The Brand Carrier with Flamethrower on it, the Wasp, doesn't have any way to survive the Panzer IV if it decides to kill it like that. So it's just not good enough. And right now, both of the British players, the only good thing that they're doing right now is they're actually, well, it's not Omega Man actually, they're using the artillery ability quite a bit from their infantry squads. So that is a good part, a good start to actually thin out some of the German defenses, but at the same time, they're not really in any position to capitalize upon whatever successes that they ever do, because they don't have any infantry, they don't have any vehicles, they don't have any tank destroyers. So at whatever advances that they may decide to do, and even if they do get any success in those advances, they will just not have any units ready to take up the mantle and take the territory and then hold it. Because what they will do is they will advance, they will take maybe a point or two, they will maybe kill a machine gun or two, and then the Germans will come back in with a vengeance with a huge amount of infantry and vehicles that they will not be able to counter, because they don't have any units that can just hold a territory. They don't have any units that can kill a tank. They don't have anything. And at this point, I don't feel like there's much that they can do to reverse the course of this game, because there's just too many German units. Look at Renegade. He's lost a Panther. He's already lost a Panther in the few minutes that he had it out. And the Panther has 16 pop cap, and he's already back up to 80. So just the fact that the Germans have doubled the pop cap of the British already should tell you how the game is going. And the artillery piece makes this even worse, because again, sometimes you may be behind, but you have an artillery superiority, and in a map like this, artillery is very important, because of course, with the clustering up, with the defensive play that is kind of forced upon you by the closed spaces of this map, the choke points, artillery is very good. But the Germans have the artillery superiority as well. They have 2 mortars to the British 1, despite the fact that the British 1 is a mortar emplacement, so it has more firepower than the 2 German mortars combined. But the downside, of course, is the fact that it's kind of forced in standing still, which, if a mortar is in a very conservative location like this one, then, again, the advantage isn't really there. And they also got an artillery piece, which is really good against emplacements. It's really good against retreating infantry. It's really good for just taking out support weapons that are clustered. And they have a Panzerwerfer, which is also good against infantry. It's also really good against moving infantry because of its just quick firing and quick time between the attack and time between the attack and the sort of reaching. That was also a really good bombing run from Renegade. Yeah, what I was trying to say is the time between the firing of the salvo and the time... I can't speak today. Time between firing of the salvo and when it reaches the ground and hits the enemy. So why that's really good is because, of course, if a moving infantry force is trying to attack your positions, then you want to have something that can fire and the attack will reach quickly so that it cannot be dodged. Whereas the normal artillery piece doesn't really have that good of a time between in terms of that, because of the fact that it just has to aim and it takes forever, and then it fires, and it will just take forever to actually reach, for the shell to actually reach the ground that it's supposed to hit, and it just takes forever. So that's better against emplacements and support weapons. And I don't think that there's anything the British can do right now, because they've just completely lost everything. And what could they have done differently? Well, for a starter, they could have actually used their doctrines a little bit more and gotten for an AVRE. AVRE is really good against what the Germans were doing. The Germans were going for a lot of support weapons, a lot of very immobile vehicles, a lot of very immobile just units in general, and they've also gone for an immobile strategy. They had the huge block in the south just had their huge block of units in the south blocking the enemy, and then a small block in the north. So both their strategy and their units were very slow and defensive minded, so an AVRE would have definitely been a really good counter for that. At the same time, I would have liked to see a little bit more just good usage of infantry out of them, because of the fact that they lost a lot of their infantry, and they didn't rebuild it. And that was definitely really bad, because if they had gone for a lot more infantry, and if, more importantly, after losing in the south, they would have just gone for the north and fortified up the north, they could have turned this into a game of, oh look, we're across the river, and there's the Germans in the south and the British in the north, and that would have been to the advantage of the British, because of their Royal Engineer pick gave them a very sturdy sort of emplacement-focused playstyle to work with. And in a more static game, yes, an even more static game than we had, that would have been really, really hard for the Germans to counter. At the same time, what could the Germans have done differently? I feel like a flame half-track from either Ice or Renegade would have been an excellent decision, because of the fact that there were so many buildings that were coming into play. The flame half-track has two flame projectors that deal a huge amount of bonus damage towards buildings, and units and buildings, of course. And so it would have been really good to clear out the buildings. And also, I would have liked to see an earlier artillery piece out of Ice. The artillery piece was excellent, and it just gave them a lot more pressure on the sort of British holdfast in the south. And so the fact that they had that was really good, and having that even earlier would have been good. Keeping alive the scout car and using it for its recon purposes with the spawning scope would have been even better. And also perhaps cutting down on some of the infantry and going for a Panzer IV command tank would have helped them out a lot, because of the bonuses that the Panzer IV command tank gives. Now Renegade would have probably been better served just trying to go for a Brumbear instead of a Panther, because of the fact that the Panther, yes, it's good, yes, it's well armored, yes, it's fast, but it's not necessarily the most effective vehicle against infantry, and what the British were going for is mostly infantry and medium tanks. So the Brumbear would have been a good sort of emplacement buster, as well as a good anti-infantry vehicle. Other than that, I don't really see anything else to talk about. Also, a little bit of the munitions float from the Germans could have been avoided by placing down a lot more mines. Of course, there was a lot of artillery fire going down that could have just killed the mines, but still, mines are never bad, and they just win games. So more mines would have also been a really good decision out of both German players. So I want to thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the cast. It was definitely enjoyable. I hope you learned something from it, and I'll see you soon.